teachers of Reddit, what's your most NSFW story from your workplace? Please like, subscribe and comment so I can create more videos for you. In high school, we had a beloved teacher and I am still friends with him to this day. However, he viewed taking attendance as a big waste of time, and his class was enjoyable, so kids rarely skipped it. So he'd just give the class a once-over and try to notice if anyone was missing, and sometimes kids would yell out that a kid was sick. Well, on this particular day, he marked everyone as present, including a kid that was not in class, as he was busy murdering his uncle. So the teacher had to go to court and say on the record that no, he is not providing an alibi for the student, he's just terrible at attendance. The administration really got on his ass about attendance after that, and he was good about it, for a few years, and then he went back to his old ways, saying it's very unlikely I'll have another murder during my class. It's actually very likely that a murder will take place during his class, but less likely that it would be by one of the students in his class. Lol. I am a 7th/9th grade teacher. I'm only in my first year. Apparently an 8th grade student, 14 years old, was getting called a slut and other students were saying she was sleeping with 4 guys every week. She then stood up in my class, turned to the people harassing her, and yelled, "I've only fucked 2 guys this year, so shut up." Being a large man in his early 20s, I completely ignored the situation and just asked everyone to quiet down and get to work. It was very uncomfortable. You either run your class like Sparta or you made the best possible decision. I have too many. The one that sticks out the most is the time my teaching partner and I were working after school. He went down to hall to use the bathroom and saw a line of high school boys coming from out of the girls' bathroom. He taps one on the shoulder and asks what's going on here. Lo and behold, an honor student was in the girls' handicapped stall letting the boys' basketball team run train on her to get them pumped up for the state playoffs. Of course she was expelled, but was allowed to walk for graduation in May. Some people let their freak flags fly. This chick was 6 freak flags over Texas. Caught 2 students having sex on top of a slide on the playground after school. It was one of these slides with the covered waiting area at the top. Her face was sticking out of the front of it and his ass and feet were sticking out of the back. She saw us, another teacher and I, first and started screaming that she was stuck on the slide. He freaked out, banged his head on the inside and essentially tumbled back down the steps while trying to get his pants up. They were 5th graders BTW. School maintenance here, to come to mind. At one middle school a boy came running into the office to tell everyone that he saw 2 people in a stall together in the bathroom and that a girl had been blowing a guy and that the guy had a huge dick, but I can't remember what word he said. He didn't use the word dick. At another middle school a teacher who had a bad case of the flu lost control of her bowels in front of her class. She must have been aware it was coming because the diarrhea started in the middle of the room, and there was a huge trail of it from the middle of the room to the hall. We have custodians but another main guy and I were close by so we cleaned it up. I felt bad for her. She went home but was back a few days later and stayed for the rest of the school year. I'm sure there are more stories. Been doing this for 20 years now. That woman must be the Buddha. I can't even imagine the amount of shade middle schoolers could throw at someone who pooped themselves in front of the entire class. Had an autistic kid in our class, 2 teachers, myself included, who wasn't potty trained despite it being in a class level where he should have been. He shits himself. The other teacher is like TNT, go get him changed and I'll keep the kids busy. I take him to the bathroom, and go to grab his backup pants. The other teacher shrieks because one of the other students is pelting toys at her. I go to take care of that mess. Takes me all of 30 seconds. I come back to autistic boy and he has stripped himself and smeared his shit all over the walls, toilet, sink, himself. It's a shit tornado. I almost quit that day. Do you hear that, Randy? The shit winds are a-blowin'. The shit tornado is coming. There's a couple. The biggest one was my mentor was caught sharing genital pics with a student that he found on a gay website. Yes, He was married, and just like that I was on my own. The one that caught me off guard was I had a student from a foreign Asian country, and she came up to me after class one day asking questions about science. These questions quickly transitioned into a weird place when she started asking me out, saying things like I don't mind having an older boyfriend. Bear in mind her English wasn't the best. I quickly guided her out of the classroom from then on. I've told this story several times, but here goes. I was an occasional substitute teacher in the town where I went to college. The band director often requested me to come teach if she was out sick, since I was a music major and could work with the kids on their parts. Get in for a day, and my instructions were to break the kids up by section and have them practice their parts. I spent the next hour listening to miasma of sounds from woodwinds, brass, strings, etc., but no drumming. If you don't know any drummers, they are always playing or banging on their laps, tables, steering wheels, etc. Curious me goes to investigate the drum room, and I walked in on the token female drummer flashing her breasts to the boys in exchange for money. Was volunteering in a kindergarten classroom. Was going through some old papers and found a letter from one of the mothers to the teachers explaining a bathroom incident. It went something like this. Kinshiro was in the bathroom stall peeing in the toilet when another student climbed under the stall. Kinshiro got very nervous at the sight of the boy and lost control of his pee. He peed on the student's face because he was very scared. Please do not punish Kinshiro. I will take this a different direction. My first week of teaching had its ups and downs. I was teaching a pay class and had a new kindergarten class for the first time. A few minutes into class, a little 5-year-old boy raises his hand. Mr. Counterper, I have a problem. My pee-pee is really hard right now and I don't know what to do. Holding in every ounce of laughter I had, I told him I was sorry and that we would talk about his problem in a few minutes. Not long after he raises his hand again. Yes, Caleb. Don't worry. It's not a problem anymore. He tells me with the biggest smile on his face. Gotta love teaching elementary. Yeah, this happens to me all the time at the preschool I work at. This kid came up to me the other day and just yelled, Mrs. Servidis, my penis is big again, and there was a tour of prospective parents there who heard it and I kind of froze. But, yeah, kids have no shame. We recently had to talk to a girl about self-stimulating during nap, and there's a couple of other kids we regularly have to talk to about that too. It's difficult BCS, you don't want kids to feel embarrassed or ashamed about that, but they also need to know they have to do that in private and not at school. I was a teacher 2010, 2015. I was teaching high school at an all-girls school and there was this student teacher from a local university. He was 19 or 20. He was always being a jerk to this one senior at the school. I thought it a bit odd he was always focusing on her. Fast forward a few months and it was post-graduation. I was out at a local bar and look over and see them together there. A co-worker said they had been screwing for the past few months. I asked him how he knew. There was a smaller teacher's lounge in one of the wings of the school. As there weren't normal classes in that wing, it was not frequented and the setup wasn't as nice. He said he popped in there one day and she was down on her knees blowing him. He closed the door and walked away. Not long after, the student teacher found him in his class and asked him what he saw. My co-worker was a bit stunned and said he wasn't sure. The student teacher said that he should keep what he saw to himself or the truth could get twisted against him. He implied the senior would state she was going down on my co-worker and not the student teacher. There were no cameras or anything in that area, so my co-worker decided to keep his mouth shut. That's why you immediately walk straight to an administrator and report that shit. Don't give the other party a chance to collect their thoughts, plan anything, or make any threats. I'm a paramedic, not a teacher, but we ran a call at a high school one day for a girl that was feeling sick. After questioning her for a while trying to find out what was going on, things just weren't making sense. We get her in the back of the ambulance away from parent and teachers and she finally opens up. Apparently she recently started giving her BF oral sex and he wanted to finish in her mouth, but semen really grossed her out. So in order to get over her phobia, the BF thought a little exposure therapy would do the trick. He provided her with a Ziploc bag full of semen so she could ingest it all throughout the day. She only made it to about 10 AM before becoming violently ill. Poor girl, I felt so bad. Okay, is anyone else wondering how long it took for this kid to accumulate an entire bag of cum? Was it just sitting in his nightstand for a week? I feel confident in thinking that he didn't take the time to refrigerate it before encouraging his GF to fucking drink it all. My mom is a preschool teacher, and here's the best story I heard so far. There was this kid who bit everything. He chewed on toys, walls, teachers, and of course other preschoolers. So one time a kid comes out of the bathroom that is in one corner of the class and his pants are down and of course his willy is hanging. The second my mom notices the biting kid does too, but he's in the opposite corner of the class. He starts sprinting towards the boy and my mom does the same, but she, being in her 50s, is slower, but closer to the naked kid. She gets there just barely to grab the kid who's just standing there and takes him off the trajectory the biting kid is on, with his mouth open and charging like a torpedo. If she didn't get there faster, the kid would probably be scarred for life. That living torpedo is probably around 10 right now, and I heard he's normal now. I had just begun class, freshman comp at a community college, and was going over what the day's plan was. A student walked in a few minutes late, sat down, and pulled out his computer. Upon opening the computer, very loud moaning sounds of porn emanated into the room for approximately 3 seconds. Once he got it to stop, he shakily said, "I'm sorry." I stood at the podium and said and a couple of times and then, "Give me just a minute, guys." I stood there looking down at the podium, trying to collect my thoughts as calmly as humanly possible, so I could continue class like nothing happened. After around 15 seconds of pure and uncomfortable silence, a kid from the back of the room let out a 2-syllable, guttural chuckle. I lowered my head to behind the podium with my hands still clasping onto it above my head as I bent over and lost my shit. I laughed hysterically and uncontrollably for at least 30 to 45 seconds, emulating Stewie's ridiculous laugh from that episode of Family Guy, but with far more wheezing and high-pitched squealing. The entire class started laughing with me as soon as I started. After I was finally able to collect myself, I apologized to everyone and said I was sorry, and that I had tried so hard to remain composed. Later, when telling this story to other faculty, they agreed that there's no time in pedagogy classes devoted to the appropriate reaction to porn noises being played during class, and that I did the best with what I could by not calling the kid out. I literally didn't make eye contact with him once, or kicking him out of class for something that was embarrassing enough as it was. Side note, the kid stayed for the entire class. I was impressed. TL. Dr. Kid's computer blasted porn audio. I laughed uncontrollably, then I apologized for losing composure. My old roommates and I used to fuck with each other by opening the weirdest porn possible on each other's laptops and turning the volume up all the way so this would happen when they would go to class. We were all 18 and it seemed funny. One day I went to my religion class and opened up my laptop. There were a few women in costumes blowing a guy in a King Kong suit on full blast. Fortunately there were only about 6 kids in the room and the professor wasn't there yet, but that's when I learned to always plug in headphones when I open my laptop. Home ec teacher asked a pregnant girl if she could get the placenta from her to eat. And that's about it, I think. My teachers weren't too wild by any means. I just don't wanna let this thread sink too far. Lol, not gonna believe this after this kinda blew up on me. I only just now remembered that the teacher that taught the problem kids, or slower kids, stole pornography from one of them and apparently just had a bunch in his desk that he'd hear about every so often. That's more in line with the post. Sorry, tacked it on here though, don't wanna post again for this. Edit. Username is from my grandmother commenting on a picture of me making an odd face with WTF Christine. She thought WTF was short for why the face. Student taught at a high school in a more rural area of Georgia. Had a freshman end up in a wheelchair for a while after trying to have sex with a horse donkey mule. Conflicting stories. He ended up in psychiatric care by the end of the year because he was writing letters to some of the girls detailing horrific sexual acts he wanted to do with to them. At the second place I student taught at, I asked the class if they had any questions after going over the requirements for an assignment. I had a girl raise her hand, and after I called on her, she proceeded to ask me if it was possible to fill a condom with shit and then use it to go fuck myself. She was immediately sent to the office and was removed from that classroom. Probably not. A condom filled with shit would be too soft and floppy to insert into any orifice. Anything else? Not me, but the woman who taught across the hall from me. She was teaching a 9th grade math class, and her classroom had those old-fashioned pencil sharpeners that attach to the wall and you turn the lever to sharpen your pencil. One of her students was sharpening her pencil every day during class and seemed to take a long time to do so because each time she would stand at the back of class sharpening her pencil for 2 minutes or so. After a week or so of this, the teacher went to ask if the student needed help sharpening her pencil. Turns out the girl was putting her vag up against the pencil sharpener and was using the vibrations to get off in the middle of math class. A buddy of mine is a teacher in Kentucky and tells this story proudly. A couple of years ago, the senior class was doing their walkthrough for graduation. Usually after the walkthrough, the seniors are allowed to go home early. Well, a guy and a gal decided to skip the walkthrough so that they could go out to their car and fuck. Presumably while in the back seat, they decided to do anal, and it led to the girl shitting all over the guy's car. By the time the walkthrough had finished, the seniors were headed out to their cars and the entire graduating class walked out to the guy and gal trying to hurriedly get dressed and clean up shit from the back of the car. My friend often jokes about what a shitty situation that was. See, in these situations you can't just go for the obvious poop joke. You really need to sit back and dig deep and think of something that will really cause a lifelong burn. You don't want to just make fun of them, you want to wreck them. A friend, B, was fucking with friend A and found his dick pic on his phone, was actually looking for his GFS nudes, and to fuck with him he set the pic as his lock screen. Fast forward 5 minutes and the teacher walks in and takes the phone because she had a strict no phone policy. Another 10 to 15 minutes later, the teacher asks what time the class ends and had friend A's phone on her desk and decided to check the time on that instead of the clock right behind her. Well, she saw the dick pic and didn't say anything but just handed the phone back and never took it from him again. Not my story, but I went to school with the poor bastard. When I was a junior in high school, there was a kid who got left in the hallway either mid blowjob or halfway through sex by his girlfriend because he started having a seizure. She didn't go for help, she just ran away, so a lot of people at my school found him with his pants down, his dick out, seizing on the ground. A lot of people I went to school didn't even think there was a girl there, they thought he was masturbating in the hallway and had a seizure. Subbed at a school years ago. A teacher broke up with a student he'd been statutory raping. She got upset with him and told people they'd been having sex with each other. Then another girl revealed that she'd been having sex with him too. Then a girl who'd graduated the year before said they'd been together as well. And then another, from even earlier. It turned out this teacher, who was coach for one of the girls' sports teams, had been using that team as his own personal harem for over a decade, finding, grooming and seducing at least a dozen high school girls. The school district paid an unspecified amount of money to a lot of people to have him quietly resign and leave town. Edit. It's depressing how many people read this and ask if I taught at their high school, because something just like this happened there. This incident was almost 30 years ago in the US Northeast. This happened at my high school after I left, but with a better ending. Math teacher that also coached girls basketball had been grooming 14, 17-year-old girls for years and none of them spoke up until a couple years ago. He gave middle school girl a burner phone with the intention of her taking nudes and giving it back to him, but she told her parents instead and he was arrested shortly afterwards. When the news broke, dozens of past students from both my high school and the school he had taught at previously started coming forward with their stories. According to most of the stories, he threatened to fail them or kick them off the team if they told anyone. He's still in prison, so that's a plus. This kinda isn't my story, but it's still good and NSFW. One time a kid was doing his visiting days at the school. We were a private school with kind of a history of admitting misfits, and during art class was seen by another kid masturbating under the table to completion, then wiping his ejaculate on his t-shirt. When the head of the middle school told his mom about it afterwards, she said, "Oh yeah, that's something he does when he's nervous." Needless to say, it was a hard pass from the admissions office. I walked in on the gym teacher and the art teacher having sex. Right in the staff room. The art teacher had the gym teacher bent over the couch and was going to town. Not the way I wanted to start my day, but they seemed to have started it out well. Edit. Lol, I didn't realize how many of you would want to know the sex of the teachers. Both are men. Edit 2. Holy shit, some of you have amazing imaginations. Here I am reading every comment to see if the answer is given on the sex of both teachers, and it just hasn't been given. Somebody please inform me when the answer is provided, please. I'm not a teacher, but my aunt is. She has spent her career working with EC kids. Apparently masturbating frequently anywhere, anytime is a thing with these kids, particularly the ones with Down syndrome. She has many stories of kids just suddenly start beating it in class. She used to talk about this one particular girl that had DS and was constantly masturbating. They did have a punishment routine for these kids, as they are not dumb and knew right from wrong, but it didn't seem to work with her. She took this kid, and others, to the Special Olympics in China a few years ago and had to have a chaperone assigned to her specifically to keep her from masturbating in public during the events and anywhere else they were. She still managed to rub one out here and there from what my aunt said. EC teachers, I salute you. My mom's a social worker, and I'll never forget when she had to find cartoons about masturbation to explain to an autistic kid why he shouldn't hump his desk during class. My mother taught elementary school for 35 years. Second grader told his teacher he was going to shoot her. Teacher blows it off. Next morning my mom waits for the kid to get off the bus, follows him to class and grabs his backpack when he put it up. Yeah. Loaded revolver. No news. Nothing. Cops came, but the principal kept it relatively quiet. This was Houston, mid to late 80s. Wife has been teaching about 15 years. 8th grader in foster care sat in the front left desk, draped his jacket on his right side. Proceeded to whip his junk out and go to Cranktown during class. Wife noticed, called for help without the rest of the class even knowing. Kid didn't get the satisfaction of her looking scared, etc. Hopefully the kid got help. Brother taught at a last chance high school while he was coaching football at another high school. 17-year-old girl walks up after class and calmly says, "Coach, I wanna suck your cock." Brother was mid-20s at the time. Said half a second flashed by then. No, come with me. Walked her down to the office, sure he's about to get arrested because she will twist the story around. Thankfully she didn't. Brother quit soon after. Not worth the risk for a young guy. What is with all these stories of guys jacking off in class? I don't think any classes of mine turned me on in any way. I'll repost my story from a different thread, not actually NSFW, but potentially so. I just started teaching 9th and 10th grade English. 14 years old, and Rhea had a total crush on me. From day one. She learned that I love, read, and write poetry, and she'd show me some of her stuff, which was actually quite good. She'd come to my room during lunch, during my planning period, and show me more and more. Being super uptight about being a lone a female student, we'd go into the hallway or library. Her poems started getting more and more erotic, however, and eventually I had to tell her that, while the writing is very creative, the content is not at all appropriate to be showing your teacher. She eventually began to tone it down and started writing spiritual poetry that I can only describe as love poems to God. Think, Rumi, Dart. But the one she had me read that was obviously about me and her in a wooded cabin, loving in every way possible, with the most uncomfortable experience in the world. To colleagues of mine, Frank and Sophie, were having an affair while both being married. They got caught in the shower at a weekend school trip where students and teachers spent the night at a facility. Cue the affair being out in the open. Frank is now sick at home trying to make amends with his wife who's depressed and mentions suicide more than once. Sophia, who was a representative for the Christian Values Party here BTW, got the boot from her husband and now has a thing, I kid you not, with Frank's best friend. Best parties, all the while another colleague and one of my good friends, Bert, found out his wife Leanne was having an affair. Bert and Leanne are now separated as well. I tried to be as supportive as possible until the day Claire, another colleague, told me that while Bert was married to Leanne, he was also hooking up regularly with yet another colleague of mine, Zoe, Claire's best friend. I actually forgot about the fact that Claire broke off her marriage with her husband Pete to be with an ex-colleague of mine, Robert, who was dating another current colleague at another campus, Lois. Pete and Lois even managed to hook up for a while after that whole debacle, so yeah. Go figure. You know that saying about truth being stranger than fiction? Well yeah. Our school's a mess right now. Basically I'm just happy to eat the popcorn and not be the movie. Edit, added some fake names for clarity and yet another twist I forgot about. You are essentially living the school equivalent of Grey's Anatomy. Watch once you get introduced into that school, and the whole community will have it in a month. A prof of mine recently told me a story about a student of his who gave him a flash drive to hand in an assignment. When my prof plugged the flash drive in and opened the folder the student told him to open, he came across pages and pages of hardcore porn. He, as politely as possible, was like, "Are you sure it's in this folder?" To which the student, who was not looking at the screen, was like, "Yeah, it's in there. Keep looking." After scrolling some more, my prof called the student over to the computer and was like, "I'm pretty sure it's not in here." Of course, the student was beyond embarrassed. Will definitely never ever forget that one. P.S. Imagine if the assignment was in the porn folder, though. Like the student came over to the screen and saw all the porn and was like, "Oh yeah, just scroll down a little more." LMAO. That would be a god-tier power move if it really was in the porn folder. Nah dude, just scroll down past Anal Midget Party 4. It's next to Blonde Gets Ass Destroyed by Massive 4-foot Dildo and Lord of the Cockrings. You'll see it. Nobody would dare question a man of such power. I have two. The more mild one goes like this. We were teaching a little pseudo class on geology, and asked our older kids the name of the supercontinent before it split into 7 continents. Nobody answered, so we were trying to coax them with "it starts with a P," and a little 7-year-old just bellows out "PENIS. Lesson over. The worst one was in the 3-year-old's class. One little boy whipped his dick out, and started shouting, "I have an erection," at anyone who cared to look. We had to chase him. He was fast for a toddler. Edit, the little boy had a massive fro just like you know who. Just thought I'd put that out there. I student taught in a rough high school. A girl got suspended because she snuck into the auditorium and literally had a line of kids getting blowjobs from her, and paying her, then heading back to class. Edit, remembered another one from the same school. There was a girl who was in a wheelchair and I asked my teacher I worked with what happened. She told me that the girl had a boyfriend the year before and then cheated on him, and the boyfriend shot her in the leg and now she can't walk ever again. Edit again. I may be wrong about her being shot in the leg. It may have been her back, which would make way more sense, lol. It was 5 years ago, sorry. I teach 9/12th high school, grade maths, and oh boy, in one of my previous schools, around 5 years ago or so, a coworker walked into the lounge pretty early in the morning, like an hour before school officially starts, to find 2 other coworkers screwing like rabbits near the desks. He told us he took one look, went to his desk, left his stuff and went out to grab coffee. Don't think I saw him the year after again. In a school I worked at, there was a huge backyard that was basically like a forest. It went upwards until you reached the fence. In 3 years I saw 4 pairs diddling each other during class hours, and once I was with a coworker and we busted a lone student jacking the jackhammer behind a tree. I don't think I've laughed that much in my life. When I went back home, in my country, every month the schools spend one day doing basically nothing. It's called stroll. The students can't leave school premises but they can do anything they want inside. I was with a couple of co-workers roaming the yard when someone starts shouting "mouse. mouse, and everyone loses their shit over a mouse that's cowered in a corner of the wall. We're chuckling and we approach, intending to help the poor thing escape, when the janitor runs up to us with a broomstick. In an instant, he squeezes the mouse into the corner with the broomstick. The fucking sound that came out of the mouse as the fucking guy squeezed it to death still makes me tear up. Every student started shouting and looking away. I honestly let out a half scream, and one of my coworkers pulled the janitor away. It wasn't even a large mouse, not even a rat. Just smaller than a palm. It got demolished. We picked it up with some paper towels and one coworker took it. No idea what happened to its body. Would you like to explain this stroll thing? It sounds interesting. What's the purpose? Couldn't the students just as well stay home? Or is it meant to be used to do work one is behind on? University, 100 level foreign language class. It was my first year teaching. My patience understanding tank was at 100% and insert story about wanting to be that teacher I never had. One young lady came to class about 33% of the time and when in attendance, quietly sat on her phone. Her grades plummeted as the material built upon the foundation of the months prior until we get to the final exam. Students needed a C or higher to move on to the 200 level class and her F meant that even a 100% of the final would result in her repeating the class. She emailed me before the final notifying me there was a death in the family so she would not be able to take the final. I didn't believe her but said, okay, come in the next Monday for a retake and per university policy. Bring a note from a parent confirming the absence was for a funeral or bring me some handout pamphlet from the service. She showed up on the retake day with no note. Instead she pulled out her phone and showed me a graphic picture of her deceased uncle laying on a hospital bed. He had been in a motorcycle accident and the picture showed it. I said, okay, here is your test. I immediately let my superiors know and the situation made its way up to the administration program director. After calls communication with the family, nothing changed and she was back the following semester. Edit, spelling. Many years ago, when I first started teaching at a theater school, I came into work hungover. It was not my intention to drink as much as I did the night before, nor did I think any repercussions from said drinking would last to my first class the following day. But that's the situation I found myself in when soldiering forth into work. I thought the hangover would eventually subside. But it stayed strong with me through the whole workday. I managed to function normally, without anyone being the wiser, until it came down to my last duty of the day. We were auditioning students for a show. The nerves were high amongst the students while I was using every fiber of my being to keep it together. It was probably the 5th or 6th student in the rotation that froze on stage, walked up to me from the stage area, and said they were not feeling well. I smiled and tried to calm the student down. But as I was explaining that everything was going to be okay, the student puked all over me. That's when my resolve went out the window and I puked all over the student. This triggered a few other students to vomit as well. Luckily, I wasn't the only teacher in the room, and I was able to excuse myself to get towels for the mess. I successfully played the whole thing off as a sensitive stomach and was kindly offered the rest of the day off. But that was the last time I did any drinking the night before a class. Edit, feel like I should clear a few things up. 1. The drinking in question was a much higher proof beer than I thought I was having. And I was drinking straight from a growler jug. 2. The smell was mainly stomach acid with a hint of the ginger ale I was drinking to calm my stomach. 3. Of all the scenes the comments below are referencing, the Family Guy Ipecac scene is the closest resemblance. Student not teacher, but here's one. In the band room there's a ladder which leads to a storage attic. Perfect place for 2 gay classmates, I know both of them personally, to blow each other, right? Well yeah, but not if you're going to gag so much you throw up on the other guy. Nobody can go into the band attic anymore. Edit, don't phone keyboard and Reddit, kids. Or vomit inside other people. Edit, RIP my inbox. I actually was a teacher. Middle school, 6th to 8th grade. Caught 2 students having 6th, 7th grade. Parents were called in. Parents of the boy yell at him, ground him, do the parental thing. Girl's parents go on about how their precious little snowflake wouldn't do such a thing. She was a good Christian girl. Baby born 9 months later. 8th grader whips it out in class and goes to town. Bonus. Principal's son. Nothing happened to him. He kept doing it in various classes and moves on to high school. Tries to do it in high school. Expelled from the school because dad couldn't pull strings for him. The teacher for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes got caught having an affair with a fellow teacher by a student. They were going at it in his classroom. Both of them were the holier-than-thou types. Hilariously, they still tried to pull the old Jesus forgives us of our sins and you're going to hell if you mention it again. They were fired. Kid got caught jacking off into the chili by the head lunch lady. School had to spend literally thousands of dollars to call in a massive pizza order because there was not enough time to make another lunch. Kid high AF on meth. Real shitty home life. He was expelled and put into one of those alternative schools. Really ticked off to this day that he wasn't actually given any help, just passed off to someone else. I still think about him to this day and hope he's okay. Then there is the usual. Smoking weed in the bathroom, blowjobs in the bandroom, kids cursing out teachers, asshole parents, kids beating the holy hell out of each other, etc. I don't teach anymore. She was a good Christian girl. Baby born 9 months later. They must be so proud of her to be chosen by God himself to be the next Mary. My wife's school, one of her last year student was sent to child protection because she is 15 and was running a prostitution ring with other girls from same school. The 15-year-old girl would try to get other girls to join the ring. She even asked one of my wife's students to join in. It's supposed to be a secret because the girls are minors, but everyone in that school knows about it now. BTW. No pimp involved. They would use the net arrangements with their clients. Peas. It was hard to think of this on English, ignore any grammar mistake. Homosexual student says at graduation he's going to send out a list of all of the men he's blown in the 4 years. Announced it a month ahead of time and it apparently was going to have a lot of straight male athletes on it. And X200B. According to them, getting blown by a dude is not gay. He's the gay one, not them. Weird, I know. And X200B, well, flash forward to a few days beforehand, everyone was tense. A star football player beat the living shit out of the kid, put him in the hospital. Football kid lost his D1 scholarship. And X200B, the list never came out. I wonder what would have happened if it did. The kid basically admitted he was on it for attacking the kid though. Student then, but within the teaching profession now. Back when I was in junior high, a group of girls went over to a neighboring resort. It was a hotel, ice rink, golf course, etc. It was also situated near a very large river. These girls were all native and were close. During the afternoon there was a huge commotion in the school and you could feel the tension, but no teachers would tell us what was going on. Turns out the group of girls all skipped class, walked over to the resort and all tried to kill themselves in numerous ways. One tried to hang themselves from a tree, the other was found walking on the frozen river, I'm assuming trying to fall through, and another was found with their wrists having slash marks. It was really messed up, but the school somehow managed to keep it fairly quiet. They weren't around for a while after that, assuming they were checked into a mental health facility. Years later, one of the girls actually did die of an OD. She left behind 2 small children. It was listed as accidental, but I always wonder. In my high school, it was a fucking meat market. In my grade 11 year, a super hot new teacher, who was engaged, and the gym teacher, who was engaged to my friend's older sister, were caught fucking. They got suspended, but then they both just picked up and moved to Dubai together. From Canada, grade 12 year, the vice principal was having an affair, the principal was having an affair, and another 2 teachers, one of them married, were caught plowing each other in a classroom during exam week. My favorite math teacher was one of them. Go get him, Mr. Rosenstein. This was a school of 400 students, so probably no more than 50 staff total. Not quite the same as some of these, but still fairly relevant. I teach at the college level, but this happened when I was in high school still. Our Spanish teacher was married to the vice principal of a nearby, larger school. They had a child and seemed to be a pretty good couple. This changed when it was revealed that he was having an affair with one of his teachers that he oversaw. The secret likely would have stayed, but the local media had contacted him for an interview. Turns out the teacher he had been having an affair with was caught having sex with multiple students at the same time, and there were several others that were coming forward. The VP didn't know of this yet. The school had found out about the affair and were excluding him from the investigation. So when the media came, he began to defend himself for sleeping with the teacher. The reporters hadn't known about their affair, but they didn't stop him either. As for our Spanish teacher, she felt pretty depressed, and understandably so, and became pretty weird around us students. During class she'd often talk to us about sex, periods, flexibility, and other related topics. A few months later, on a study abroad trip to Spain that she was leading, she often let us students buy her drinks, and we caught her making out with multiple guys at different bars plus one of the students' dads that was on the trip. It was really quite a time. Incredibly, that affair changed my life forever. My teacher's husband was supposed to accompany her for free on the study abroad trip. After the affair, he was no longer invited. My teacher ended up secretly offering the trip to my mother. We were a middle-class family and my parents wouldn't allow me to go to Spain without one of them there. I was just 14 at the time, and there's no way we would have been able to afford to pay for 2 people to go. My experiences there led to an increased interest in socio-political cultures, and I am now in my 3rd year of a PhD in political science. Funny how the world works sometimes. Wow. That's an awesome ending. Hopefully your teacher is doing better too. I'm not a teacher, but a story I heard from a teacher was that some girl was caught with a group of about 15 guys in the storm drain in front of the school in a huge ass gangbang. They estimated about 50 plus condoms were used during the course of a few hours. Afterwards, there was a chlamydia outbreak at our school. Those seniors, man. Edit. Wow, this is getting a lot more attention than I thought. Edit 2. Jesus, that's a lot of karma. Also, I'm seeing a lot of it references. Pretty nice stuff. Edit 3. I forgot to mention this, but this happened on a Saturday during a football game, which is why so many people were involved, and how they were caught by a teacher. 50 plus condoms may be a small exaggeration, but many people came, haha, and went throughout the course of the game. But the 15 guys were the ones initially caught. Maybe some of the condoms they found were from previous visits. Maybe they used more because they used 2 at once. I don't know, but I know it was around 50 for whatever reason. I worked as a security guard for an alternative high school for kids 14, 21 years old. Most were gang related or have had jail time or just weren't allowed back to public school. The stuff these kids would say was the funniest I've heard. The only NSFW related one I remember is one student started a small prostitution gig and was caught with 3 other students behind the gym. The guard who found them while walking the grounds washed his eyes out for about an hour. Not a teacher, but figured this was worth sharing. It was my freshman year. These guys thought it would be a good idea to dare this girl at the table to give this one guy head. Keep in mind there's teachers monitoring the lunchroom. So, they all stacked up their backpacks around the table to block the view, and she went under and took care of business. They took videos and everyone found out. It even made national news and both students got expelled. Not me, but a coworker. Her first year teaching, she had a class of 12th grade students, and they were studying Beowulf. She gave a quiz, and one of the questions was basic vocabulary, asking for the definition of disembowel. When she handed them back, a student raised his hand and said that she'd marked Tommy correct when he said that it involved removing the head, but she'd marked his paper wrong. She said, "Well, if I gave Tommy head, I guess I have to give everyone head." Yeah. She was facing the chalkboard for a while because as soon as the words left her mouth, she knew what happened. Edited to show that she didn't face disciplinary action. She just couldn't face her students for a couple minutes. That is hilarious, but I definitely hope she was a well-liked teacher. A popular teacher can get away with that with students. but it'll undermine the crap out of an unpopular one. I'm not a teacher, but my mom tells a story all the time to friends of something I did in first grade. So for first grade show and tell, in the 90s, we had to bring in something that started with the first letter of our last name. Mine was P. The morning of show and tell, my mom asked me, "You ready for class? You have your item?" I responded saying yep, all good to go. Fast forward a few hours. The school calls my mom and tells her to come in immediately. So my mom got to school and met with the principal and teacher in a private meeting. I guess they couldn't stop laughing while trying to be serious to explain what I did. I went up to the front of the class, pulled down my pants, and said P is for penis. And completely had no problem being naked in the front of the classroom. I don't remember it myself, but my parents still laugh to this day what I did. They always taught us the real terms to our private areas when young, so the teacher was surprised I knew those terms. A particularly nerdy 14-year-old freshman girl had a crush on a popular sophomore boy. He was a little dick, and pulled a she's all that and pretended he was interested in her as a joke. Eventually he pushed her to send pictures of herself nude. She complied. She started sending pictures and then sent a video of herself masturbating. The boy shared this video with friends. She found out and freaked out. She asked for him to delete them and he said he would only if she took a picture of a fellow classmate nude in the changing room. So, she did. She took a photo of another very popular 14-year-old girl nude after basketball. She sent the picture and the male student shared it with his friends. Shit hit the fans, as expected. The parents of the locker room girl were livid, and sued the other girl's family. The family ended up settling out of court and moved away. The sophomore boy basically had little repercussions aside from a jump in popularity. The nerdy girl lived next door to me growing up. Her parents were extremely religious. Her dad was into our small conservative town's political scene. They were pretty wealthy and well known and basically just disappeared. I can only imagine how awful it was for their kid. But Jesus Christ, this is why you teach your kid about sex and consent instead of pretending like they're perfect little angels. All kids that age are hormone-ridden monsters, and this could have been avoided if someone had been blunt with her about what is and isn't appropriate. Also, fun fact. If a parent owns a phone that has pictures of nude children on it, they can and will be charged with possession of child porn. Talk to your kids about sexting, and the legal ramifications of sending nude pictures of yourself as a minor. Obligatory. I'm not a teacher, but at my school, one of the professors who knew it was his last year with the school roasted the entire teaching staff during the prom night dinner. He didn't hold any punches and us, the students, thought it was the greatest thing of all time to hear one of our teachers absolutely rail the other teachers. One of the more sensitive issues he brought up was husbands getting together to cut the food bills due to a few teachers having gastric bypass surgeries and losing large amounts of weight. This was a private Christian high school and the holier-than-thou executives were absolutely furious. The teacher who did the roasting ended up with the last few weeks of the year on paid leave and was not asked to return. I do think the act likely cost him a job at some point down the line because he contacted us to remove the video of the incident from YouTube a few years after the situation. I work in an after-school program, and one day one of the 5th grade boys came up to me and said, "Yeah, no, I decided today that I'd make a really good virgin." I was like, "WHT?" And he repeated himself. I told him he probably shouldn't talk about that at school. I had a good chunk of kindergartners, and he started to get annoyed, like, why can't I talk about it? It's not a big deal. So I pulled him out in the hall and asked him what he thought virgin meant. He said to me, "A virgin is someone who doesn't eat meat and butter and stuff." At this point I lost my shit, laughing, and told him he meant vegan. Not a teacher, but I did hear a lot of teacher gossip from my maths teacher when I was at school. Typical stuff like complaining about people's food being stolen from staff room fridge by other staff members etc. But one day she had a very interesting story to tell about a well-respected teacher at the school. He was a very quiet type of guy, was quite small and middle-aged, and was very far from threatening. But he was a very good teacher, and so he didn't really have to scream at people for respect or authority. People generally listened and sympathized with the man. One day during a quiet moment in one of my classes, he scurries past the door seemingly in a rush for something. Not like him. My maths teacher leaves to see what's up. Apparently his face was sheet white and he explains to his colleague what he had just witnessed in his own class storeroom. Apparently 2 students were in the middle of full-on intercourse. Mind you, this is a secondary school with kids aged 11-18, in the dark with the storeroom door unlocked, and the poor teacher was just going to get some supplies while his classroom wasn't being used, but the guy ended up had to go through the whole process of recording their ages and bringing home to their parents. They were both 18. As a side note, the guy that got caught doing it in the storeroom was someone who groped my girlfriend on many occasions, before I met her, and the girl was my driving instructor's daughter. Apparently 2 students were in the middle of full-on intercourse. Mind you, this is a secondary school with kids aged 11-18. Oh sweet Jesus number. Had to go through the whole process of recording their ages and bringing home to their parents. They were both 18. OHH, thank God. I am not a teacher, but I work on the field. Can't really explain my job in back then. Not a native, but it was something like student counseling, kinda of an office of school to help kids with social issues and such. Anyway, we got a girl coming in, worried with her best friend because she was now a prostitute and she wanted us to help her. We are talking 9th grade here. The girl in question was 14. After we listened to her story and asked around, she wasn't having sex for money, but it was close. She was very addicted to cigarettes but couldn't afford them. So she was sucking dicks, the dicks of the rich kids. Basically one blowjob for a pack of cigarettes or the amount of money required to buy one. When she couldn't find clients, allegedly she offered boys that were smoking themselves a handjob if they gave her a few cigarettes. Depressing and sad. And X200B. Cannot say how the whole thing was fixed though. This was my very first job and was an intern. I spoke with her twice. She never denied anything and couldn't really seem to grasp how the situation was bad. I do what I want. No one is forcing me to do anything. What's the problem? My internship was over shortly after and never knew what happened tbh. This was like 8 years ago. I'm not the teacher in this scenario, but back right after Columbine, the junior high my mom worked at started doing backpack searches. I don't know when or how often, but they did some on the first day of school. It was largely pointless, but one 6th grader had a whole stash of stuff that was equal parts hilarious and disturbing. I don't remember the whole list of stuff, but the 2 items I remember clearly are a big bottle of Jim Beam and a box of condoms. He thought 6th grade was going to be way more eventful than it actually was. Lol. I'm not a teacher, but I did used to work. It had a very wealthy school system. I'll never forget the time I caught some kids sparking an enormous blunt on campus. I walked up to them, as authoritatively as possible, and told them to thank their lucky stars that the tech guy found them and not a teacher. I made them hand me the blunt and told them to be thankful that I'm going to keep this secret. They ran off. I walked to my car in the parking lot, and put that shit in the glove compartment for the ride home. Guys are so cool. Kids at my school found a way to upload pirated movies to a folder in school network. Other kids would download them to thumb drives, take them home. The it guys found the stash. One was a quiet nerdy guy and the other reminded me of Seth Rogen. They pulled me aside. I was shitting myself. I thought I was going to jail or worse, expelled. Pretty much the first thing they did was laugh and say why would I upload LOTR 2 and 3 but not Fellowship of the Ring. Said it was a bad idea, don't do it again, and they took them down. In retrospect they could have gotten into shit for them as well and didn't want me to say anything. I like to think they were watching them as well. Cool guys. First day teaching. I was subbing for a 3rd grade class at a school where the majority of the students are in poverty. I forgot the technical name for it because since then, I've been battling cancer and my memory has begun to fail me. Title I school. Is that it? But anyways, this day was the first school day after the Parkland shooting in Florida. I believe it was President's Day. Kids had to write down if I were president I wouldn't write a few sentences. First kid, if I were president I would bring a gun to school and kill all of you so I don't have to come to school anymore. Second kid, if I were president I would kill Trump. Keep in mind these are 8-year-olds, so they're all laughing and clapping and stuff. Sent them both to the office with a tay and they were sent back with just a light verbal warning. Still not sure how it happened. If I write down that stuff in 2000 I would have been suspended or worse. Never took another job at that school again, needless to say. We had a really unfortunate string of teachers sleeping with students. First time, guy was fired and faced some criminal charges. We all had a beating saying how unfortunate it all was and how we needed to remember our obligations to students and maintain appropriate boundaries. 6 months later, a substitute, female, had sex with one of our seniors. She was fired. She was a substitute, so she was taken off of the list of people we call, and didn't face charges because he was over 18, and we don't have that law that some states have where it's illegal for teachers regardless of age. So, again, new set of meetings really reinforcing the idea of not sleeping with students. It was also theorized that the problem was that these teachers were young and the age difference wasn't great enough. So we hired 4 more seasoned teachers. The following year, one of these new old teachers got busted for CP on a district laptop. Now, I'm not saying that there was probably a reason these teachers had been bouncing from district to district rather than staying put, but the creep aside, they were all assholes. So now, parent confidence is eroding, principal is worried he's going to be made the sacrificial lamb, announces that we're all going through more training and that they are beefing up our background checks. This meant, incidentally, that in addition to our already robust background check system we'd get a mildly racist retired cop interviewing each of us, I guess, to see if anyone pulled a law and order like confession about wanting to sleep with teenagers. He didn't ferret out any perverts. He was too busy being fixated on the fact that I'm Muslim and a science teacher. So, obviously sleeper cell. His investigation might have caused me more of a headache, except he then got caught masturbating in the school parking lot during field hockey practice. Ironically, things did settle down quite a bit after the principal took it upon himself to move on. My dad always had a fear of my sister and I playing in the water at the beach. Turns out when he was teaching back in our home country, he was also coach of the basketball team. One day they had a trip to play a match. On the way back, because they won, the kids get to go to the beach. My dad told me this day was what messed him up for a good amount of time. One kid got caught in the deeper part of the water and could not get back. A fellow kid jumped in to help before the staff noticed. When the staff tried to swim out to get both kids, they had been swept away. After hours of searching, one of the boys was found, bloated with water and lifeless. My dad said he carried the body back to shore, and had to make the hardest phone call to the parents. Not a teacher, but my English teacher's husband, who is a science teacher, cheated on her with another English teacher at our school who is married. So my English teacher and her husband ended up getting divorced. Due to the nature of international school, both teachers got to stay until their contracts are over and their classrooms are all next to each other. The worst part is kids from both families also goes to the same school and the whole school knows about this drama. I student taught in a high school band, but for one period a day I went to the middle school and taught 6th grade school choir, which was comprised pretty much solely of girls. During my first week, I was walking in the back of the classroom pulling some music from the cabinets, when I see one girl who I guess was excited that she was developing stand-up, turn and face her friends, and unzip her jacket to show them. I have never wanted to gouge my eyeballs out more than that moment. You can't make this stuff up. And X200B, there was a couple caught in a stairwell engaged in a sexual act that reached completion. Apparently, they didn't get in much trouble, as the school year was coming to a close. We came to know that they had reached completion because by autumn of the following year the girl involved, who was a student in my class, clearly had become pregnant. She lasted several months and then finished the year out of school. And X200B. Fast forward 16 years and a brand new school year. Into my class comes a young lady with a familiar last name. You guessed it, she was the daughter of my previous student. She thought it was great, and it was often a source of a good laugh in class. Needless to say, I also got to see my previous student mom at back to school night, and she was equally excited about the situation. Said she had loved my class and was thrilled her daughter had gotten me as her teacher. And X200B. And X200B. A 6th grade boy was sobbing in the hallway one morning near my classroom. The principal was comforting him and I came out to see if I could help. What happened was that his grandfather guardian had found 2 of the farm dogs chasing the neighbor's chickens that morning and shot the dogs dead, right in front of his 12-year-old grandson. The kid was distraught and we couldn't do much to help. This was obviously a rural area and there were several brutal things like that, but that one stood out to me because of how callous it was. In the same preschool grade 8 school, we had a 1st grader who licked urinals. Gak, a mysterious toilet paper thief, most likely a kid who didn't have enough TP at home, which is really sad. But at one point he stole a whole case, so the janitor noticed and the school had to intervene. Video showed it was a male student, but he never was caught. And a break in around 2 AM where a chemically impaired man stole huge packs of frozen food from the cafeteria, mostly breaded chicken. Ike just sat in the library for an hour like something out of Paranormal Activity, and finally walked around taking anything of value from teachers' desks. Thankfully my classroom door was locked for that one. I once had a couple in my class. The further they stayed together, the more open they got about their relationship. After a few weeks they even started to talk open about their privates and sex life together. They were like 16 or 17 years old. By the time I realized what was happening, they already started asking questions to teachers about their privates and sex lives. The girl even started to wear very revealing outfits to school and ask male and female teachers alike if they liked the outfit. Men and male teachers got embarrassed by her and female teachers tried to talk some sense in her. They really didn't know any boundaries. Eventually I couldn't stop them anymore. I was their coach, so I was responsible for them. And we even had to call in the parents before things got out of hand. Parents didn't know what was happening at school and it turned out the couple really didn't have any clue what harm they could do to themselves and others, teachers in particular, with their behavior. Luckily it didn't escalate into something else. Edit, used the wrong word. The girl even started to wear very obscure outfits to school and ask male and female teachers alike if they liked the outfit. I'm not sure what word you meant to use, but it isn't obscure. Maybe you meant revealing. Obscure means to hide or cover, or something not easily understood. For example, the fog obscured the view of the buildings, or they stopped the debate with an obscure rule about who can propose a bill. Not a teacher, but about one. I had a chemistry teacher in high school who was already an established creep. He had a clear preference for girls who showed skin over the ones who dressed more modestly. The last day of class we were all wasting time, and we came up with the idea to play spoons to pass the time. One of the girls called to the teacher, "Mr. Creeper, do you have any plastic spoons laying around we could use?" And to a 16 or 17-year-old girl he responded, "I don't have any spoons, but I'll spoon with you." Unrelated, I don't think he's a teacher anymore. Oh boy. I worked at an international school in Europe, which had dorms attached. Students were in the habit of conveniently getting sick on test days or due dates for big assignments, like all students of course, but another teacher said, "Hey, you know where they live? Go call them on their bullshit and give them the test in their dorm room." Good idea, I said. One day I'm giving a test, and one student, widely considered to be the hottest girl in school, is missing. So I take the test over to the dorm. I tell the dorm parents why I'm there. They laugh and let me in. I go to her room, knock, and she says, "Come in." I open the door and she's startled to see me. Sits up clutching her blanket covering her skin. "Why are you here?" "To give you your test," I say. "I'm so sorry you're not feeling well," I said, tongue in cheek. "But sir, I'm not ready for the test," she says. "I know." She let the blanket fall slightly to reveal her bare shoulders. "Mr. Lurker speaks. Did you know I am naked under this blanket?" Fuck. I stood up and noped out of there. "You can take the test tomorrow, etc. Hope you feel better, etc." That memory's been in my spank bank for 11 years now. P.S. This being Europe, she's already 18 but still in gymnasium high school, which is consenting age and drinking age. Just so you all don't think I'm a complete perv. I taught 2nd grade. I was teaching students about capacity, gallon, liters, cups etc. on the rug by the board. Kids are sitting a few feet in front of me. We stand up to do some demonstrations when one boy sticks his hands down the pants of the boy standing in front of him. His hands were inside his underwear. We made eye contact and he froze. I sent everyone to their seats, called the office and asked the offender to come outside. Nothing really came of it. The boy who was touched was more concerned about keeping his friend happy than about being abused. I had to discuss with his mom how to approach her son, and explain that friends don't do this. The boy who did the touching had several issues and his parents dealt with it by beating him and encouraging me to take him to the bathroom to beat him too. Once I had a second trader come up to me and say, "Miss, do you know what a golden shower is?" He said this like he might know and wanted to know if I knew. I calmly said, "What? You're so silly. What do you think a golden shower is?" He said, "It's a shower that is all gold instead of tile." I said, "Oh, that is silly," thinking this was over. I turned in my chair and then I heard him say, "Yes, parents are getting one." He overheard them and they are really excited, but they told him not tell anyone. I wonder why. I had to have a talk with the whole class about not telling secrets even to best friends.